shalt surely kill him. It shall be first upon him to put him to death. Thus saith the Lord, and thus saith the servant of the Lord.
Hello and welcome to the Brothers Random Show. My name is Travis.
I'm Michael.
And we are two ordinary brothers discussing extraordinary ideas and some random shit. So the topics on this show range from theology, masculinity, stories, movies, philosophy, books, pop culture, and many other subjects. We often talk about the people we admire and the wisdom they share. People such as Dr. Jordan B. Peterson, who we believe is the sage of our time. Come here for the polygamy, stick around for the philosophy. Michael, why are we here?
Today we're talking about Hulu just picked up a docuseries called Daughters of the Cult.
I was 13 years old the day I escaped my father's cult. It was very frightening because I knew if somebody saw me, that was the end.
Our father was the leader of a Mormon religious cult.
Our dad had 13 wives.
He was more revered than Jesus.
This is the story of Orville LeBaron and his cult, the Church of the Firstborn of the Lamb of God, where he ordered murders and has a death toll estimated as high as 30 people that he ordered to be killed.
Just a side note, that is got to be the stupidest name for a cult I have ever heard. So I would not say that
the best name for a cult. The best name for a cult.
He wasn't a creative person. He might have thought of ideas about how to kill people, but he was originally called at one point, one publication called him the Mormon Manson because he ordered hits.
Mm-hmm.
I never
and he had women. He had a lot of women kill for him.
Yeah.
So
how this relates to us? Well, if you're new to the channel, you obviously don't know that Michael and I grew up in a polygamous cult. We like to call it a diet cult because it was not this extreme.
And we weren't ordering murders.
And we were not
that we know of. So
we actually came out of a cult called the AUB. And what does that stand for again, Michael?
Apostolic United Brethren.
Another dumb
yeah.
name for a cult. You and I should start our own and just come up with an awesome name for a cult.
A cool name.
A cool name. We could call ourselves the Cool Cult.
Anyway, let's try to separate ourselves a little bit from. We're going to be talking about Orville LeBaron, and who was the prophet of his organization, and he was ordering hits on people he didn't like, and one of the hits was on the leader of the organization that we grew up in, Rule C All Red.
So we growing up, so this happened way before we were born and before our parents had joined their group. So we grew up hearing, like, this was like folk tales in the AUB.
Yeah.
It's basically Rulin was killed for being the righteous and good prophet kind of mumbo jumbo that they kind of fed us.
He was a martyr.
He was considered a martyr.
His
brother took it over. That was Owen.
Yeah. Owen.
And Owen was the leader of the church my entire childhood.
Yeah.
I remember meeting him. I remember seeing him. To understand the way that Mormons see their prophets is to, so if you grow up thinking that this man has regular conversations with God, this man in your mind becomes a deity. You kind of worship the ground that he walked on. And so the AUB was a little bit better at the time. Now I can't say anything for it now. And you've left, you've been gone for several years out of it as well. I can't really speak for what is going on now, but when we were growing up, it was considered to be one of what the more liberal of the polygamist groups. Is that fair to say?
Probably not the most liberal, because I mean, there's a lot of different groups out there.
Well, they were drawing the line at orgies, so they weren't having orgies.
Yeah.
So
that's true.
So they weren't that liberal, but they
not
they
as
weren't
liberal as some. I mean, wasn't the Laffertys? Wasn't that a scene in one of the Laffertys?
the Lafferty. So we've talked about the Lafferty cult as well.
Which Hulu again
Hulu did a series on.
That
was a dramatic
series, Heaven, which is great.
Under the Banner of Heaven, which is really good. It's based on
which is actually better probably than the docuseries that we are discussing today.
Yes.
But that's okay. We're still
gonna
Daughters of the Cult.
Daughters of the Cult is the subject matter is fascinating. The way that the docuseries is being presented is kind of cringy. They've got a few of Orville LeBaron's children who are talking about the growing up in his cult.
The thing that gets me though is they made Under the Banner of Heaven about the Laffertys committing one murder. There is a whole series behind, like, waiting to be made about Orville LeBaron.
With dramatic series.
We even
You're saying
said
dramatic.
it years ago, like a year ago. We talked about it, and we even said, because we were watching. We had just finished Under the Banner of Heaven. And we were even saying, guys, if you want a real story, like
this is well,
Orville LeBaron, guys, come on.
Who'd you get to play Orville LeBaron in a dramatic role?
Who would play Orville LeBaron?
Okay, well, we should probably talk about what the previous incarnation of this story.
Yeah.
So the previous incarnation of this story is called The Prophet of Evil. Now, it was a made for TV movie, and I have no idea where it aired, but it was made for a TV movie. It starred Brian Dennehy, and those who don't know, Brian Dennehy was the villain in Rambo: First Blood.
Did he also play in Cocoon? Was it Cocoon?
He might have been the villain in Cocoon. I can't remember. But in the basically 70s, 80s, early 90s, he was like the go-to guy to play the villain in a movie. And he played Orville LeBaron.
There are a lot of religious fanatics out there. Most of them are harmless.
Believe me, Mr. Fields, this one's not harmless.
This I have seen, and so shall it pass. My brother Verlin will go to the funeral. My brother will die.
This isn't really about religion or ideology. It's about a bloodlust. It's about an armed cult leader. A madman seeking power. And he is coming. Believe me, Mr. Fields. He is coming.
This is the movie that you and I remember as children that our parents showed, because this was about the group that they were a part of. And so it was kind of fascinating that Hollywood had taken this story. And so just to differentiate, Orville LeBaron killed the leader of our group, the AUB, in the 70s. His brother took his place, and then in about, what was it, about, would have been 90.
77. Was
No,
he
I'm
was
saying
killed.
when our parents joined would have
Oh.
been the 90s. It would have been somewhere in the 90s.
91,
91 probably.
something like that.
Something like that.
At this
At
that's
this
actually a good
stage,
question.
yeah.
Yeah,
So our parents joined that group, the group that was being basically attacked by Orville LeBaron, and there was no other reason that he was attacking other than he was jealous of Rulon C. Allred's success with his group. Rulon C. Allred, they were a wealthier group. They had, because of the liberal, I would argue, because of the liberal views of that group, they were more likely to get more members, to bring in more members.
yeah, and I mean, it was probably a lot of it was probably just like a lot of the same views of the LDS church, but we're practicing polygamy. And so a lot of people that would read some of the history and
older histories, yeah,
and some of the scriptures in the LDS church would start to investigate this thing, polygamy, and a lot of times they would end up, because they would end up in the AUB. And our parents, it was kind of that way with our parents. Our parents were like, oh, I think this is probably something that we should live. This is probably how we should be living. We need to go find an organization that's doing this. And they went and investigated some of the others. And I remember Mom telling stories about going to the Kingston group. And like they just went to church, I think, just to one of their meetings, and nothing against the Kingston group. I don't want to just bash the Kingston group, but and for those who don't know, it's just another polygamous group in Utah. So
yeah, do you know what the estimation of all those are? Like how many there are?
Like how many different ones and how many? No idea. And it's probably like the old saying. Did you ever hear this saying about drug dealers? Is you probably don't know that you know a drug dealer, but you probably know at least one. You ever heard that?
No.
Okay, so this was back in the early 2000s and the late 90s, but I remember hearing that in high school. But that I would say is kind of, if you live in Utah, you probably know someone who's a polygamist. You just don't know that
they are. I believe that it makes sense. So that's
probably pretty
wild.
There's a few out there. Anyway, and they try to keep secret. So for a lot of reasons, but
one of them is because
that's another video we can do about.
So back to the series. So the series is about the daughters of Orville LeBaron, and they basically speak to how things were ran, how things were done. And Orville LeBaron was part of one group and felt that he needed to be the leader and left that group. And then according to this documentary series, even though I don't know if they have any proof that he ordered this, but his right-hand man went and killed his brother, who was the leader of a rival group. Joel. Yeah.
Yep.
So Orville LeBaron never committed the actual killing, but he ordered them. And so when you're in a cult,
that we know of, all of his killings were by his order and not by his hand.
Yeah. And
which I don't know, but it's like, if I was to be a bad guy, wouldn't it'd be like one of those things. Yes, order the killings, but you every once in a while you would just have to like let your people know that you're brave or whatever, bad enough that you could do it yourself.
You think, but
like
it's
another
weird
level of cowardice, I guess,
that you don't do your own. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah,
I think
it's
so.
more
I mean,
skeevy. It's like
the real bad guys can,
commit it themselves.
can do it themselves.
Well, that's one of the reasons he was called the Mormon Manson, is because Manson just was the same way. He would get other people to do his dirty work.
Yeah.
So, and what's weird about it is that people, I don't know why people are so easily swayed. It's either they've got to be maybe somewhat unintelligent to be able to be convinced to kill. So I personally, nobody could talk me into killing somebody.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah.
I don't think, if I was to kill somebody, it would have to be in defense of my family. That would probably be the only reason I would ever. But what I'm trying to say is that what kind of mindset do you have to be in to be convinced to kill somebody for somebody else? I guess if you're convinced that you are the hand of God, God has ordered this. And
this is one of, this is one of the big black eyes on just Mormonism in general.
Yes.
Is this problem.
Yes.
Like there's
the Blood Atonement. We should probably talk about the Blood Atonement.
Blood Atonement. Yeah. So there was some early teachings.
That's what this episode is called. The very first episode of this show is called
Blood Atonement.
Blood Atonement.
Yeah. So some of the early teachings lean towards this idea of blood atonement. And I think, I'm pretty sure Brigham Young comes right out and says it, kind of thing. But this idea that the atonement of Jesus Christ, you've sinned so badly that the atonement of Jesus Christ isn't enough for you anymore. And therefore you need to have your blood spilt in order to atone for the bad things that you have done. Now for Ervil, that just meant, I don't like that guy. He's supposed to be killed.
Yeah, he's supposed to be killed.
The big one growing up and we talked about it a bit in growing up in the group that we grew up in. It was always talked about in this kind of, that's something we would never do sense. Like we said, the AUB that we grew up in was much more of the liberal bent, I guess you could say. The
Blood Atonement wasn't preached so heavily.
Yeah,
I would say.
And we, in our priesthood meetings, we would discuss it. One of the things I do remember, somebody saying in one of the priesthood meetings that I was in, that it was basically that blood atonement couldn't be done by force. It needed to be done by volunteering. So basically, like, suicide is just another sin. But if you go to the correct authority and you're like, hey, I have sinned so greatly that I need to spill my blood for atonement, and then they would kind of have that authority do it. Now, and the theory behind that was that Judas actually did that after he betrayed Christ, that he went to, the theory was that he went to the apostles actually and said, hey guys, yeah, I've done this really bad thing. Can you guys spill my blood so that I can atone for this bad thing that I did?
Even though there's no scripture about it.
There's no scripture, but the thing is when you get in Mormonism, it's almost like a pick and choose for Mormons, especially when it comes to the Bible, because we believe the Bible as long as it's translated correctly. And even then they still think that things were left out, and et cetera, et cetera. And
Well,
so
that just opens everything up to being whatever and
whatever you want.
whatever you want.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I believe in the New Testament, it says that Judas hung himself, the branch broke, he fell, and
he's got
cut
spilled
open
onto the earth.
his stomach and his bowels fell out. So
okay,
it was a horrible death. But I've seen some people read into that. Well, how does he just fall and his bowels fall out? Like, no, somebody came and cut. Anyways,
that's a lot of hoop jumping from one to the next. So,
but it's exactly hoop jumping for like some of these people like Orville LeBaron to be like, oh,
well, the blood atonement,
this blood atonement thing,
yeah,
it's because Rulon C. Allred isn't following me.
Yes. Isn't that crazy? So we can all agree, if you are a Christian, you can agree that the Bible has all these good things that have brought it. Mm-hmm. But if everybody's taking those kind of hoops to jump through, you can justify anything you want, including the blood atonement. So that it's the blood atonement is almost complete opposite of what Christ said.
Yeah.
Christ was like, forgive one another.
Mm.
And the blood atonement's like, you will not get forgiveness until you're dead.
Yeah. Well,
what's the whole point to Christ's the sacrificial lamb of Christ? What is the point to that if you can do something so horrible that the only way to survive is through or the only way to get forgiveness is by killing?
Well, that kind of branches into some things like capital punishment.
Yeah.
Right. So if I murder somebody and then I in turn am killed in the prison system, right?
Yeah.
Right. Ted Bundy getting the death sentence, right? They didn't spill his blood, right? So because the spill his blood, it's supposed to be like your blood's supposed to hit the ground and
it's all metaphorical. It's supposed to be metaphorical, right?
Right. But like now I don't think that atones for anything.
There's still
he just got what he deserved.
Yeah, there's still a justice. There still should be justice, right?
But that's kind of I think that's one of the kind of ideas behind it. Anyway, I am not trying to, defend this blood atonement.
Well, by
any means.
Well, let's discuss that because, okay, so is it better to do, so you take Ted Bundy, he's been convicted, he's admitted to all these crimes, to heinous crimes, to disgusting shit.
Yeah.
And if you're a really deep thoughted Christian, you'd be like, oh, we forgive you, pat on the back, go about your day. Go on.
I don't know that Christians would be behind that.
Well, I don't think so either. But what I'm trying to get at is like, that's an extreme, right?
Okay.
And he's just going to go off and he's going to go do what he's doing again.
Yeah.
So the whole point to capital punishment of him was just to keep him from ever doing it again, right? That would be like the whole point to capital punishment or Mosaic law, eye for an eye law.
And there's arguments to be made like it makes an example of him, right?
Yeah.
So, hey, listen, you go out there and you're killing a bunch of people, we're going to kill you.
What's the difference between the atonement and that, or blood atonement and that? Is the difference in basically
we as a society, death, what is it? Put Ted Bundy on death row I don't think that we are theorizing on what that does for him in the afterlife. I think we're just like, you're a bad dude. We're exiting you out of this life.
Yeah.
Right? We're not theorizing beyond that. There would be some, I guess that would
So
be
the Blood
a religious
Atonement
scholars theory of like maybe, or of a discussion that, hey, like, does this, if he does, if we do kill him because of his crimes, does that atone for anything? I don't think so. I mean, I think you're reaping what you sowed, and now the debts come due.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think Ted
but
Bundy's burning in hell.
You're not reaching salvation by giving your life because of the horrible things you did, right? You're not getting salvation.
Right.
So Blood Atonement gives you the option to have salvation by offering yourself up. So do you know where,
I guess, part of the theory behind it?
Yeah. Do you know where this comes from? Is there an actual like scripture that talks about Blood Atonement?
I'm gonna hopefully not going to throw people who believe, who are LDS, under the bus, but I'm pretty sure it mostly comes from Brigham Young.
Who was it?
I think Brigham Young had a lot to say about it, and he ran his mouth on it.
He ordered hits.
And yeah, so there's that. Off the top of my head, I can't think of any actual Bible scriptures. In this docuseries, one of the gals says that it was in the Book of Mormon, and I don't think that's right. I don't think it is in the Book of Mormon.
Well, when Nephi kills Abinadi, that's considered blood atonement.
Oh.
I think that story alone has given justification for Mormons killing other people for a very long time.
Not really, because he tried to kill him 2 or 3 other times. Laban did.
Tried to kill
Nephi 2 or 3 other times. So it's one of those things where it's like, hey, if I tried to kill you 2 times and then I by chance, like I tried to kill you and your family 2 other times, and then by chance I'm passed out on the street and you come by me.
Well, it's not exactly a heroic way to kill somebody, that's for sure.
Exactly. But you see my point, right? Like, well, it's like,
yeah, I do see your point, but I think that's one of the things that is just the saying, it's better for one man to perish than a whole nation to dwindle in unbelief. That whole saying has justified Mormon ritual or Mormon religious killings for a very long time. And the whole point that I'm trying to make with that is that so what's happened is, if you can justify a religious killing, who's telling, like,
where does that end?
Who's ordering that? Who's making
who gets
that?
To order it?
Yeah, who gets to order something like that? So if you believe that this guy
100%.
is the mouthpiece of God and he's talking directly to God, then he can do anything he wants in the name of God and and even when it goes against the core beliefs, like thou shalt not kill.
Yeah.
Right. What about that core belief? Did Ervil LeBaron just forget about that core belief?
That thou shalt not murder, but yes.
Yeah. So, thou shalt not murder.
Exactly.
Yes. But the whole point to the Ervil LeBaron story, I guess we should kind of sum it up. So in the first episode of the docuseries, he kills his brother, has his brother killed in order for him
Yep.
to become the leader of the church that he
Which I don't think he really got any
followers off
it's
of
not
that.
like it's not like he went and killed Joel and then all of his followers are like, oh, you killed Joel, therefore we're gonna follow you now.
But
No.
that's why they did the massacre, which wasn't a real massacre. Only 2 people died, but like 19 people were injured. So he basically,
in the attempt to kill his other brother, Verlin. His other brother Verlin, they were trying to kill and throwing off Molotov
cocktails and burning down houses. And this all happens
like, as people were running out. They were shooting them. Anyway, so
this all happens in Mexico, and Ervil has figured out how to pay off officials in Mexico, so he gets off scot-free after all this.
Yeah, so not a lot of evidence on that, but it very much looks like that he was convicted in Mexico for the murder of Joel.
The one leader, original
for the
leader.
other he was so Joel's brother was the leader of the church of the firstborn of the fullness of times. Have to get that all right. Church of the firstborn of the fullness of times. Joel was the leader there. And then Ervil was kind of apparently getting jealous of Joel being the leader. So he wanted to go start his own church, and he named that the Church of the Firstborn of the Lamb of God. So 2 different churches now.
Which they're both idiots in my mind, because those are terrible cult names. Terrible cult names.
And then he has his guy. So Dan Jordan was his
right-hand man.
Hitman.
Yeah.
And he has Dan kill Joel.
And then
so the Mexico authorities actually
arrested him.
Well, he turned himself in.
Yeah, he turned himself in. Yeah.
He turns himself in, and the Mexican authority, so he gets convicted though of Joel's murder. But then I think it was the next day he gets out on
he's released.
Technicality.
Yeah. So
it's like,
and if you've ever been to Mexico, it's really easy to pay people off. I mean, yeah. And so
I don't know if it's getting better.
I don't think it's getting better. And
I'm not sure.
But that's one of the reasons he probably lived there, is because he could get away with stuff while he was living there.
I've heard stories from guys that, like, you know, rented a car and they were driving around and got pulled over, and literally the cop was just like, "Hey, give me money."
Shake him down. Yeah, it was just.
And literally, the guy was just like, "Whoa, wait a minute! Like, you have to understand that in my country that is a very serious offense. I would go to jail for a very long time if I tried to pay off a police officer." And they're just like, give me money. You know, it's like,
okay.
Yeah. Anyway, so that the theory is that he paid off some officials and
got out.
Basically got off on a technicality. So, and then we already talked about them trying to kill.
Well, then they
Berlin.
raided the place, and that resulted in 2 deaths and a bunch of injuries. Yeah. Then after that, basically Ervil LeBaron was notorious for moving his group around a lot. He was kind of notorious for, in like a good number of the people in his circle, not only were his family members, but he was always giving wives and taking wives, and, you know, and there was a lot of that going on. And they get to the United States. They get back to the United States. He's jealous of the AUB group, the Rulin Allred group, and basically orders a hit on Rulin Allred. And that's basically the end of the first episode. Now it's a 5-part mini series, I believe, and we've only seen the first episode. And I think it's interesting enough to continue it, just because this, like I said, was kind of folklore in our group. Like everybody kind of held Rulin Allred as the martyr of our group, and he was in the righteous because he was killed for his beliefs. And it's funny how they used him as a martyr to try to justify what they were doing as well. Basically, that's the end. Ervil convinces one of his wives and one of his,
I think she's his niece.
Yeah, his wives, one of his his youngest wife, to go and kill Rulin Allred.
But she was, I think she was married to Dan Jordan.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, probably. Yeah, that was right. Well, and I noticed, so they're taking old interviews from the women who actually, her, what's her name, Raina.
Rena,
probably Rena. They're taking old interviews so she obviously didn't do an interview for this docu-series. They're taking old interviews. She's may not even be alive anymore. But you'd think she was, because she was only in her 20s in the 80s. So because she was married to him very young. And this is a common thing among all polygamous sects. For some reason, they like marrying women off young. And the theory is
theory behind that.
Okay, so what is that
theory behind that? Okay, the theory behind that is there's only so many women to go around, and so literally the competition to catch a girl before anybody else does, is really, really, really high. So you basically, these guys have to try to get these girls younger and younger, because it's like,
well, they're also easy to control.
Oh, easy to manipulate and control. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. But like,
because an older,
if one of the guy that says, she's too young, I'll wait till she's 18. Well, then the other guy who chases after her at 16 gets her. Yeah.
So what's crazy about that is that Jordan Peterson often uses this. He uses an example of, like, when women are young, they are more likely to be attracted to a psychopathic man who has convinced them that he's able. Like they mistake psychopathy for ability a lot of the time.
So confidence. So they're
confidence.
So confident.
Like they're so confident and they can do things. And so this is one of the reasons that at a young age, women are manipulated. But as women get older, they realize that that they're being manipulated. And so they're looking for a competent man, but also a competent man that isn't trying to manipulate them. And so that's why I would argue that's one of the reasons that the young, so when they're young, they're thinking, oh, this man is a good man. He's a provider. He's got all this, but in fact, he's just a psychopath who's going to make you do things that you don't want to do. So,
yeah, but that's not really how, I'm sure there might be a little bit of that going on in these polygamous groups. But the thing is like these girls are most of them are getting told who they're going to marry. So there's that. Yeah. And it comes from this authority, right? Where it's like, oh, I talk for God and God told me that you are to be my wife. Right. And since I'm in authority and I tell everybody what to do anyways, I can tell you to do that. And so here's a scenario that I've actually heard.
In this is in the AUB. So the AUB kind of, because it's considered a little bit more liberal, they say that they give them a choice, right? Okay, you can choose the man that you want to marry, but what 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 often happens is that here's the leader. He's got two guys that are his subordinates, and he gives them the girl a choice between the two guys, not the choice of, oh, this young man that she's attracted to or like wants to be around. It's the choice between the two higher up, like, so they're giving them a choice, but it's like only between these two people. That's still a form of manipulation.
I can't think of an instance where that actually happened. Now, I will tell you that a lot of girls some of this would happen sometimes in the home and sometimes in meetings, in the actual church meetings, where they would basically try to teach these girls that it's better to pick a man who's mature and who has established family, right?
Because they can provide or whatever.
Right?
That's another.
The provide thing
form
is really kind of odd to me, because you'll see these women get a testimony, which is basically they feel like God told them that they're supposed to marry this person.
Yeah.
To a guy that's broke. Like, you see it happen all the time. This guy is totally broke. He can't support any.
He's living off family. He's living off the dole.
Yeah, and then this girl will get a testimony that she's supposed to join this guy's family, and I don't get it, and it's bizarre to me, but
it's creepy.
A lot of times, I think it's just a status thing where's that guy's status within
the group,
the organization,
like how religious.
So he may not make a dime, but he'll get up there and he'll quote scripture, and like everybody loves him and blah, blah, or stuff like that. So it's taking all these evolutionary
psychology
tendencies in people, and
put them like on steroids. This is like
putting them
in evolutionary.
Let's F up this evolutionary program that we kind of have, and let's just use it. Right. And I think a lot of that by the leaders will get used, where they'll be like, hey, listen, if you don't toe the line, guess what? I get to kick you out of the organization. So literally that evolutionary programming of, oh, I better toe the line, otherwise I get kicked out of the tribe, and then I get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger, right?
Yeah.
So better toe the line. And if this leader is the one that gets to decide if I get kicked out, then I guess I better do what he says. And if I do what he says, I'll be rewarded because he might actually let me marry this person that I want to marry, this young girl, right? So it's a lot of manipulation. The thing is that in the episode they talk about the girls being manipulated.
Yeah.
Also, I don't think a lot of, when it comes to the oligarchy, the almost monarchy way that some of these polygamous groups are set up, the men are being manipulated too. Now the men get a better deal overall, obviously, but a lot of people don't realize how much these men are getting manipulated. If men are being threatened to be kicked out of the tribe if they don't follow suit, if they don't do what they're told, that's also part of our human nature of wanting to be in the tribe, because if you got kicked out of the tribe, you might get eaten, and you wanted to be accepted into the tribe. So the men, have to toe the line as well. You hear stories, but guys having one wife and then literally a leader coming to them and being like, you need to get a second wife. And then all of a sudden they have to hurry and get a second wife. Those kinds of things.
Well, they pressure them into this lifestyle. That's where they discuss it in this episode. They discuss like the highest kingdom, which is it the T? I forget what they are, but anyway, there's terrestrial, celestial. What's the highest one, Michael?
Celestial.
Celestial is the highest one, and you can't get into that one without without another wife, essentially, or as many wives as possible. And it's and if you're a group that relies on the tithing, so a lot in this episode they say that a lot of Ervil LeBaron's motivation was to get more members so he could get more tithes.
Sure.
Tithing, for the layman, tithing is basically a tax on your membership. Essentially, you have to pay money to help the organization or the cult, essentially. And it says somewhere in one of the scriptures, like 10% of your income. So 10% of your income goes to your church. It's basically like in Catholicism, they do the offering plate. They pass it around or whatever. A lot of churches do it just to kind of help with upkeep of the building and to pay the pastor and that sort of thing. But in the Mormon church, it is kind of, you do not get the benefits of the church unless you are paying tithing. So it essentially, like, the benefits of the church would be the allowing to go to the temples and what else would be a benefit, I guess,
well, for the polygamous group that we grew up in, you also don't get to go to dances. You don't get to participate in the activities
unless you're paying tithing.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I think they might have gotten a tighter grip on that lately, because I don't think I ever paid tithing, and so I was like, I'm just gonna go.
Well,
anyway.
you didn't grow up with recommends, did you?
No, I don't recall them.
Yeah.
But
so you had to. It came about when I was young, but you had to get recommends in order to do any of these things, which basically meant you had to be interviewed. I think 3 different interviews.
Okay.
You had a bishop, a head of priesthood, and then a council member, and they all had to sign off on these little papers. They all had to sign off and basically say that you're worthy.
That's one way to keep people in line, right? When you're in a cult, if again, it goes back to the manipulation of the group. So if you don't want to be ostracized from the group, you better toe the line, or otherwise you're going to have so to get those recommends, you got to be compliant, and you got to not get in people's faces about anything, and so the same thing probably wasn't that formal in the LeBaron group, but it seems like it's just another form of control. It's really what it comes down to. Let's talk before we go. Let's talk a little bit about the series itself. Now, all it is talking heads and it's some reenactments. They do a very artsy reenactments in slow motion, and they have and they're kind of out of focus, and that's all fine and dandy. But the series, the subject matter is interesting. The series is not. So if people want to check it out, that's fine. Check it out. We're going to probably do a couple more episodes about it, just to get through the whole series. The subject matter is in this happens a lot with docuseries. The series or documentaries, I guess the filmmaking, the process of showing how things happen isn't as interesting as the subject matter itself. And that's what I find with this. They got a lot of people talking and experts talking about Mormonism, history and the sisters who are like kind of the focus of the series. It's just two women basically telling it how they grew up. And I would say that they're not particularly captivating, but the subject matter is. And so I think I'm going to finish it, and we can get on here and talk a little bit about it if you're game as well.
Yeah.
So that was the first episode. It was called Blood Atonement. Check us out on social media. Look for us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Anyway, thanks for that, brother. And till next time, keep reading, keep listening, keep watching, learn more. See ya.
See ya.
Thou shalt surely kill him. It shall be first upon him to put him to death. Thus saith the Lord, and thus saith the servant of the Lord.